Hello and welcome to Phillips Mill Community Association's Art Talk. I'm your host, Laura Womack, and with me is executive producer Jen McHugh.
Good evening, everyone.
We're excited to have a special guest, National Geographic photographer Bob Krist. Bob has an impressive resume. He's photographed the landscape and peoples of over 150 countries on all 7 continents. He's been named Travel Photographer of the Year 3 times by the Society of American Travel Writers. He's published several books, including one about Bucks County, and he even does video now, including a charming series for Visit Bucks County featuring local residents, and I recommend you seek that out. But more than that, Bob is a local. He moved to Bucks County with his young family when he was starting out, and he spent 25 years here. He now lives in Maine and Mexico, but he maintains his local ties. And Phillips Mill is honored to have Bob Juror our photography exhibit, which is opening in April. And for you photographers out there, submissions are now open for you. Bob Krist, it's a great honor. Welcome to ArtTalk.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here and to be a juror again in this competition, which has a long and storied history.
Right. Welcome also to everyone in the audience. We have a great crowd tonight, and I have a bunch of questions, and I've got some questions from the photography group. So we've got a lot to talk about, but this is your opportunity to ask Bob your questions. We'll take them as much as we can. Please put them in the question and answer, the Q&A, so we can find them easily. Jen uses the chat for information and links. So go ahead and join us with your questions. All right, I said we've got a lot to discuss, so let's get to it. And Bob, you've said that there are 3 elements to taking a good picture. What are they and why?
Well, you know, this all came about in the 90s when I was writing my first travel photo how-to book. And I was trying to rack my brain to think of what are the qualities that every good picture has. And you know, there's so many qualities and everything, but I kind of racked my brain and I came down in photography to 3 elements: great composition, great lighting, and the most important, I think, is a great moment. As still photographers, we're slicing off a moment of time and holding it up and saying to somebody, hey, look at this. Look at this. So why are we looking at this 125th of a second and not the one before it or after it? So light, composition, and moment. And that, you know, is the 3 universal qualities that I found that any picture that I liked kind of had those qualities. Now, I wrote it in Spirit of Place, my book in the 90s, and it's since been kind of co-opted by almost everybody who teaches photography, and that's fine because it's just validating that I think it's kind of true. But those are the qualities that I look for in my own photographs. And you know, like the dear departed Meatloaf used to say, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. If I get some good light and good composition but don't have a moment, it'll stay in the edit. If I have a moment and good light, but the composition's a little sloppy, it'll stay in there. But if it's going to be in my portfolio, it's going to have those 3 elements: light, composition, and moment.
We have a lot of painters on ArtTalk, and I just want to say that I think it's interesting that seems to be universal for it goes across media. But let's take a look at pictures. We love to look at pictures on this, and Jen has put together a slideshow of some of your works, and we're excited to talk about them. And I will just remind people while that's coming up to put your questions in the Q&A. All right, Bob, tell us about this. We'd love to hear the stories behind the photos before we talk about them.
Sure. Well, this is from what was kind of a watershed assignment for me in Iceland for National Geographic in the late 80s. It was my second assignment for the magazine, my first overseas assignment. And and I was sent up to Iceland for basically 4.5 months to do a country story. They don't do things like that anymore. But in terms of doing a country story for the National Geographic, you had to show the people, the places, the culture and everything. And one of the things that most people, now Iceland is a touristic paradise. In those days, it didn't have a tourist infrastructure at all. But I look to illustrate the kind of superlatives in a society. And Iceland is, and still is, the most literate society on earth, has the highest literacy rates, has the highest number of published authors per capita. And so as part of my coverage of Iceland, I photographed their one and only Nobel laureate, a great novelist called Halldór Laxness. But I also heard about an old farmer who was a poet, a hermit, and a priest of the Norse religion. And his name was Sveinborn Beinteinsen. And he lived way up in the mountains. And so I made arrangements to go up and meet him. And the thing about Sveinborn that was really interesting was that in those days, there was a NATO base in Iceland, and not all Icelanders were happy with that. And Sveinborn, being a priest of the Norse religion, used to regularly put a paper mache horse's head on a stick, carry it to the gates of the NATO base, and chant at the NATO base. And he became kind of an object of laughter for most of the people involved in the NATO base and everything. But just as an aside, I'd like to point out that the NATO base is gone, but Norse religion is stronger than it's ever been in Iceland. But anyway, he was a hermit. He didn't speak English. I don't speak Icelandic, but we were introduced, and he said I could stay with him for a couple of days. So I just kind of, this was the beauty of working for the Geographic at the time. They allowed you enough time so you could just hang with people and get these kind of moments. Now, I used to carry a camera with Kodachrome for the magazine, but I was a newspaper photographer, and I've always had a soft spot for black and white. So I try to shoot some black and white along the way. And this is one of those moments of Sveinborn when I'm sure the subtext is, when is this guy going to get the hell out of my house? But he was very hospitable, and I just loved the light, the gesture, the moment, and everything. And I got several frames. This was my favorite. The magazine ran a shot of him with the horse's head on the stick, praying outside the NATO base, which probably had a lot more editorial gravitas. But in terms of a photograph and an environmental portrait, I felt that this caught the guy the way I saw him.
It's just a stunning photograph. I mean, it's instantly, I'm surprised they didn't run this one because it's beautiful. And it definitely has that sense of moment.
Yeah, well, the thing about the Geographic is people think that they publish beautiful pictures, but they would always prefer to publish what they call a point picture over a beautiful picture. And what's a point picture? A point picture is something that illustrates a point about the culture that's unique. One shot that they ran that every editor loved was, in my efforts to track down ways of life that were different than America or Europe in those days, I found that there was a guy who made his living in Iceland as a full-time cod liver oil taster. And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Well, the picture is not that interesting. It's a guy in a lab coat, lit something like I've lit myself here, sipping cod liver oil from a little beaker with some other beakers lined up. The editors went crazy for that. It's not a great photograph, but how many places in the world can you make a living as a cod liver oil taster? And that's where working for the Geographic, it always meant digging deeper to go beyond the obvious photographs, and that's one of the reasons why anybody who worked for them really developed their journalistic chops.
Well, Jen gets the next one up. Is there any place now that is interested in that kind of photography? You said that they don't give you the time that they used to, but what about those, those interesting cultural shots?
No, some European magazines. I mean, the current Geographic they're doing some great stories. So I think the National Geographic is probably alone in American magazines. There are some French and German magazines, Geo, Marianne, magazines like that, that are still, they give their audiences more credit than most American magazines do for being sophisticated and wanting to dig beyond the obvious. I don't know any other gentle way to put that, but anyway.
Well, tell us about this photo, please.
Well, this photo is, again, part of my long association with Iceland. And, of course, I went up there when in 1986, and I brought Peggy and my two sons at the time, who were 2 and 1, I think. In fact, our middle boy spent so much time, we lived in the suburbs of Reykjavik. And after a couple of months, my middle boy was speaking Icelandic before he was speaking English, which really upset Peggy, so she took him home. But anyway, this is my youngest boy, Johnny. We took Johnny back up to Iceland. Peggy and I did a whole trip around Iceland, and this is a waterfall called Seljalandsfoss, and it's very beautiful and unique. And this is Johnny hiking around the back of it. It has a great meaning for us because we lost Johnny about 15 years ago in a car accident. We have a little foundation in his memory. So this is a photograph that I think for me has great personal meaning, but as an impartial judge of photography, the thing that I like about it is the light, of course, and everything. But the thing that I was ingrained in my brain by geographic editors is scale. Iceland is one of those places. There are no trees in Iceland. There are very few buildings and everything. So if you looked at this picture and you blocked out that little figure with the red windbreaker, you wouldn't know if that waterfall was 30 feet, 3 feet, 300 feet. But the presence of the human figure in the landscape immediately brings you into what that scale is. And the geographic guys back in the day, they're not as strict as they were then. You could not do these abstract landscapes without some kind of scale. That was kind of ingrained in me. But this one has kind of personal meaning because it's, our little boy, and he's not with us, but we can remember him at a fond moment like this. And I think that's the power of still photography, to bring back these kind of moments.
It's stunning, and the clarity of it as well. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss, Bob.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
The clarity of this picture. I mean, the detail on the rock in the foreground, and going all the way back to the clarity of the mountains in the back. I know we need to do some technical. If we can have some quick technical thoughts for our photographers.
Sure. Well, it's side light. There's a certain time of year where the setting sun will go right into the waterfall. So you want side light to bring out texture. And this, I know all you digital photography freaks are this is shot on a 6 megapixel. This was the first generation of digital SLRs. It's a 6 megapixel shot. It's been blown up to double truck pages in all kinds of magazines. And it's, now we're talking about, we have 61 megapixels and stuff like that. So there's been tremendous inflation in megapixels and everything. But to this day, and I have not shot stills for the Geographic in about 3 years, but as of 3 years ago, if you got a digital sheet from the Geographic of requirements, it's 6 megapixels or above DSLR or mirrorless camera. So I don't sweat the megapixels. I never did, but a lot of people do, and I think a lot of that is unnecessary sweating. So.
Bob, we have some questions, and I suspect a bunch will come in. I like to prioritize them because I think it's nice that people get a chance to ask you their questions themselves. So Jen, can you help us? We've got a few questions up.
Sure. The first one is from Frank, and he asked, did you choose the clothing color beforehand in this piece?
Yes, yes. When Peggy, Johnny, and I went on this trip, I made sure that they all had red windbreakers and rain shells. It's old fashioned stuff. The red windbreaker in the green and blue landscape for contrast. It's almost become a cliche joke about the Geographic used to really do a lot of that, and it's a cliche because it works to have something of a primary like color. Although red isn't a primary color, or is it? I don't know. But anyway, it jumps out a little from a landscape of blue and green. So yeah, I dressed my family accordingly. Yes.
All right, good. And we've got another one. It's in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A so they're easier to find. But I think it's about this photo. So let's take that one.
Sure. Joan wants to know, is the photo of the waterfall handheld or did you use a tripod?
I believe it was handheld because you see that mist coming off the water. I had to clean my lens about every 15 seconds because the wind would blow. We were soaked to the skin. And so it was like, wipe the lens clean, shoot until it became completely covered in water. Wipe the lens, shoot. So this was handheld. Yeah, probably about a 60 at the 5.6 at ISO 100 or 200, something like that. I was pretty steady in those days. Today, I might use a tripod, although today we have much better built-in stabilization. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But there was just no time to do that because the wind and the water were just whipping at your face. And so the big challenge was getting a clean front of the lens.
All right, Jen, if we could have the next slide. And while you're doing that, I'll take a question from the Q&A. Douglas McAfee says, hello from Flemington. I love your work. What made you decide to switch from stills to primarily video? Are you primarily video now? I know you're doing a lot of beautiful.
Yes, I am primarily video, and it was kind of the result, and I'll try to do the Reader's Digest version, kind of a result of a late career kind of crisis of, there was just, and I think we discussed this a little in our pre-interview, there is so much software out there now that can make an ordinary picture extraordinary that it was disheartening to me because I spent my whole career shooting film in what I call reality-based photography. And I slept overnight on mountaintops, and I got up early, and I did all this stuff to get the moments that I was able to get. And I missed so many more than I got, that it really discouraged me that now you could do more or less the same thing by pushing a button on your AI-inspired photo editing software. So I looked at myself and my career as basically a journalist, and I said, okay, look, I can't compete with artificial intelligence photo software. What can I do that a talented amateur with good software skills can't do? And I could photograph people, and I could tell stories, and I had some theater in my background. So this was the kind of the perfect combination. At the same time, digital camera makers put the video capability into still cameras. I hate them for that because they changed my life, but I love them for it. And I said, let me try doing my own stories because, traditionally there's been a little competition between writers and photographers. Writers are always convinced they're so much smarter than photographers, and photographers are convinced that they're so much smarter and braver and everything than writers. And I said, well, let me see, can I tell a story? Because a lot of times I worked with so many talented writers who I will doff my hat to, but I work with a couple of writers that I would say, really? That's the story you got? So I said, can I tell the story? So video was custom made for that. Now it meant learning a whole new set of skills that I'm still learning. I'll be 70 this year, and that, it's hard to retain things and everything. But oh man, did did it galvanize me again and gave me like a whole new lease on life. Because frankly, I was getting burned out and discouraged between the lack of outlets for still photography and this ease with which people who could master the software could make pictures that I would die for, almost did die for, and they can do it with a couple of keystrokes. And I was saying, I don't know, I got to move on to something else. And so that's where video came along.
All right, great. We've got some more questions about the last shot, but I do want to look at more pictures. So maybe we can circle back on that. Because you've got a lot of great pictures here, Bob. So I love this shot. And I know you've got a story behind it, but I just want to say, how did you keep the color on his jacket and him with all that blue?
Well, this is technically what I've done right here, what we were talking about. This was for a commercial assignment for a camera manufacturer who had just put out a wide angle lens with a very wide aperture. And it was commissioned in January. January in Bucks County can be charming, but January in Miami is a lot more reliable. So I flew down to Miami and I knew I wanted to do some people situations. So I put in an ad to Craigslist for interesting street entertainers. And I met some very interesting guys, including Leo Casino here. He's a great local musician and everything. And this is an example of what we in photography call complementary filtration. So I balanced the overall color balance is very blue. It's set for tungsten. And so that emphasizes the blue of the twilight. But I didn't want him to be blue too. So I put an orange gel over my flash, and that's a little fill flash shot through an umbrella just to bring him back, but it brings him back in normally balanced color. Now, one thing, and I don't like to admit this in public, one thing I didn't notice was that his hat was the same color as the green neon in the sign. So your audience is the first that is getting me to admit the truth, because in every previous discussion about this picture, I said I did that deliberately, but I didn't. that was a happy accident.
That's great. I like the green and the palm trees too. It really works. All right. Yeah. Well, Jen gets, we're going to reverse rules a little bit because I know it takes concentration to get those pictures up. I want to ask you Richard Lennox's question. Who is your photographer hero?
Oh man, I have so many. So many of the great National Geographic photographers. I grew up looking through National Geographic. I often say that for the baby boomers, National Geographic was our internet, if you wanted to learn about the world. But starting with like the great guys from the 60s and 70s, Winfield Parks, and then William Albert Allard, Dave Harvey, Chuck O'Rear, these guys, Jim Stanfield, these classic geographic photographers who had to do everything, and they were great role models. Other photographers, probably on the top of the pile is Jay Maisel, who I think just celebrated his 93rd birthday. Jay Maisel is in a class by himself. There's all the photographic cliches that you see on Instagram now. Jay was the first ones to shoot them in the 60s when they were like strikingly original. So Jay, Ernst Haas, the great Austrian color photographer, who, to you painters in the audience, had a wonderful saying about photographers. He called us painters in a hurry. So those are some of my big influences.
That's great. All right. Fabulous picture again. Tell us about this.
Well, this was from a trip to England. My mom was a British war bride, and as I retired and kind of had chance to travel more for pleasure than for work, for a few years there, Peggy, and sometimes we bring the kids, we went back to Cornwall in the South England and just kicked around for about a month. And this was me visiting an old assistant of mine who lived in Winchester, England, and it was the Winchester Fair. And all I had was a little point and shoot camera. And these guys were walking around like real live Magritte characters. And I just stopped them and shot my little picture with the point and shoot. And, I was quite happy with it. There's a saying down at the Geographic, and I thought that Bob Gilka, who was the director of photography in the 80s, when a lot of us started working there, said this, but it could be my friend Jim Richardson who originated this observation. And he was told once when he was a young photographer, if you want to be a better photographer, you have to stand in front of more interesting stuff. So the whole thrust of my life has been standing in front of more interesting stuff. So if there's a street fair, if there's some kind of a celebration going on, whether I'm traveling professionally or with the family, I'm going to check it out. And if there was a street fair in Winchester when I was visiting my old assistant and his family, we went and spent the day there, and that's how you come across these things. The camera is a license to be curious, but you got to be curious. You got to put yourself in front of the most interesting stuff, and that is often the hardest part of the equation. I started in news photography in northern New Jersey, and there used to be an old saw about news photography that said, there's no great secret to a great news photograph. It's just a matter of F8 and be there. And, these days, and traditionally, most photographers are obsessing about the F8 portion of that. What lens did you use? What setting? What was your color settings and stuff? And it's like, who cares about that? It's being there. How can you be there in the right place? That is the art. The F8 stuff is almost taken care of. It's taken care of by your iPhone most of the time these days. All the technical stuff is being so automated by artificial intelligence. You don't really have to think of it but being in the right place at the right time, that still takes the kind of intelligence that they haven't figured out how to put into Samsung and iPhones yet. So F8 and be there. So this is a case of being there, being in the right place at the right time.
You've got that red, blue, green again. It's such a striking image. While Jen moves us forward, you were saying, I read somewhere, Bob, that you were saying that you would like to work fast. You don't like to linger. You'd like to get in and get your picture very quickly. Why is that?
Well, I like to spend enough time that I can create a relationship with somebody or and everything. But the reason was quite practical. I didn't have a lot of time. It's funny, as I moved on in my career, the 80s was the beginning of my career freelance. I started in the mid 70s as a newspaper photographer. I think I went freelance in 1980. But the magazines and the business was at its most robust in the 80s, and it became less robust with every ensuing decade. So the time of having 4 or 5 months in a country was the 80s, and it was geographic. And then, by the early 2000s, you had 3 days to cover a city that they used to give you 3 weeks to cover. So I had to learn to move quickly. But the other thing is, after a while, if you're not dealing with media savvy people or celebrities who would like to be photographed, you get in, you make a quick and hopefully somewhat meaningful connection with somebody, and you get out before you either take them away from their job too long or lose their interest or whatever. So moving quickly is a practical consideration, and also something of a nod to the fact that you're taking people out of their daily lives, and how much time do they have to give you? And that's why I say to students, learn how to use your camera, because you break the ice, you get your subject ready. And then if you're like fumbling with your settings and stuff, these people have lives to go to, and they're giving you a little window into their life. So make the most of it and be skilled as you can be, so you're not tying them up too long.
Oh, that's great advice. Okay, here's a picture close to my heart. Tell us about this, Bob.
This is shot in Burma, aka Myanmar, and it's at the Golden Rock and it is that rock is one of the Buddhist stupas said to contain a hair from the Buddha's head, and that rock is completely covered in gold foil. And I swear the real rock must be half that size. They just keep adding foil there, and it's a celebration. And you'll see a lot of this picture. You'll see a lot of this situation, the Golden Rock. You won't see it on a New Year's Eve when all those pilgrims are there lighting votive candles and everything. And this was, again, research. My first trip to Burma, we were working with a fixer, a guide who really knew his way around. And I had my middle boy with me that year. That was in the late 90s. And it's New Year's Eve, a celebration at Golden Rock. And it was shot at twilight. So when the artificial light on the gold rock and the light from the fires all balance. So it's one of those shots that, it's, for me, it's career defining because it all came together. I was jammed in a crowd. I had my tripod because it was shot on slow film. It wasn't, these days with the kind of ISOs you get on some of these digital cameras, I could have shot that handheld at 1,000th of a second, but this was like an 1/8 of a second, 1/4 of a second. And there were just people everywhere. And there were only a few frames that were sharp when my tripod wasn't getting kicked by somebody. So it's a very, very precious picture. And I know, Laura, that you've got a connection to Burma. Burma is, to me, one of the most fascinating places on the face of the earth. And what happens there when the junta goes crazy like they've gone now, it's just so sad because they're such lovely, gentle people, but man, they have been dealt a poor hand in the greater picture of things.
Yeah. Sometime, Bob, I'd love to talk to you more about that when you went and stuff, because I think getting to the country and then getting up to that rock, I know, is a challenge. That's an adventure in itself. But we'll take some more questions and we'll go to the next photo. Let's see. Nora Odendahl has a question about, what is your favorite country or locale for photography?
I don't really have one favorite. It's like asking, which is your favorite child? I don't have, but I love a lot of places. That's my problem. I like, for various reasons, Italy, Iceland, India, Burma, Mexico. These are the places, England, Southeast England, Ireland, Scotland. These are the places that come to mind immediately, but I can't point to one superlative, one that's the favorite. I like all these for different, if you want to feel the mythic power of the landscape, you go to Iceland. If you want to have a little of the sweet life, la dolce vita, you go to Italy. If you want to be slapped in the face by the cornucopia of human culture, you go to India or Mexico even. Mexico is a fascinating country because I call it kind of the India of the Western Hemisphere, because the more you kind of peel away the onion, the more indigenous cultures and different things you find. So Mexico is fascinating, but unfortunately, all we know is Tulum and Cancun and Acapulco and the nasty headlines that we see up here. But man, does it have layers on layers of culture that's so fascinating.
All right, let's take a look at this, and then maybe we'll get to a few questions with some quick answers. This one is fascinating, Bob, because it's almost an abstract. You wouldn't necessarily think photography right off the bat.
Yes, it's a picture of a tidal lagoon in the Algarve in Portugal, and it's shot from a small, not an airplane, it was a small microlight. And Peggy and I had gone to the Algarve to get away for about a month in the winter. We've become very winter adverse. in our old age. And I had brought a minimum of equipment. And it's almost as soon as I got over there, Sony, I'm a brand ambassador for Sony now. Sony called and said, hey, you know, that new camera that we gave you to go over there, can you shoot us a video about it with it? And I was like, well, geez, I can't, I got one camera and a couple batteries. So I went about to try to make a nice video and some stills with this camera. So nearby at the airport, I saw that there was these flight seeing flights and that it was an ultralight. Now, you can't really fly video from a plane or a helicopter without a real big rig called a gyro stabilizer, because there's so much vibration. But an ultralight is almost like a hot air balloon. It kind of glides, you know. The problem is I'm not an ultralight person. And when I met the pilot, who was this British guy, between the two of us, neither one of us could be considered to be ultralight. And I said, are we below the weight limit of this thing? And he says, close enough. And I was like, okay, all right. If, you know, they have a saying, there are old pilots and bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. He was pretty old. So I figured, all right, this is a calculated risk. We'll put our 250-pound bodies in the two seats and hope for the best. And it flew so low and slow. And as we flew over here, it was just this beautiful, abstract, swirling water and everything. And so we shot video and we shot stills. And this is one of the still images.
That's great. I like your risk calculation there.
Yeah.
Bob, I don't think you carry a lot of gear with you, do you? Can you give us some tips on, you know, what camera you use and how you pack for a trip?
Well, I'm a firm believer, and I think it was Henri Cartier-Bresson's saying that the more you carry, the less you see. And so I travel very simply now with maybe one or two bodies and a few lenses. My favorite camera right now currently is a 4-year-old Sony amateur bridge camera called the RX10, because it has such a wide zoom range from 24 to 600. And then I carry the camera I'm using here is the Sony A7C, which is a very compact full frame camera. And it is very good in low light. The RX10 is not very good. So I carry an A7C with a couple of lenses and that RX10. And that's about it. And backup. Sometimes I'll carry a backup body for each of these, because you never know, you know, you're sitting down on your first day and your main camera gets knocked into the canal or whatever. It's happened. So I'm a great believer. I'm a belt and suspenders kind of a guy. So I don't carry much equipment when I'm shooting, but when I go to the destination, I'm carrying almost 2 sets of everything, which is not lightweight, but I can still get all my gear and all my computer stuff on any regional airline with a small backpack and a small rolling bag. And then I'll often pack an empty camera bag in my duffel bag, and I'll just take out of the backpack, I'll take what I need for the day. So I'm a mixture of traveling light and traveling heavy. I travel heavy to the location because I just can't help it. I have this mentality left over from my geographic days. You know, you go to Iceland in the 1980s and try to find a 35 millimeter f1.4 Nikkor that fell out the helicopter window when you were doing aerials. You can't find that kind of stuff. So you bring backups of your vital stuff. And I cannot break that habit. I haven't had, knock on wood, I haven't had any catastrophic failures, losses, or thefts, but I'm still carrying 2 of everything everywhere I go. So it makes the trip to the hotel and back home a little cumbersome, but most of my stuff stays in the hotel, and I pack a smaller bag out of that. And then, God forbid, if I drop the bag in the Venice Canal or somebody robs me or something, I go back to the hotel, I got another setup. It's that old kind of belt and suspenders mentality. I have not been able to shake it, no matter how much meditation I do. I'm still paranoid about that.
Right. I think a quick quick answer for Daniel Circio, and I apologize if I got the name wrong. Did you pay the street entertainers in South Beach sax player?
Yes, I did. This was for a commercial job to advertise a piece of gear for a manufacturer. So I did indeed pay, and I got a signed model release. I don't get model releases as often as I should, and which makes the stock photography, well, stock photography basically is worthless anymore anyway. But back in the day, if you had a model release for a picture you take and included a person, it could be used commercially as well as editorially. But if you didn't have a model release, it could only be used editorially, and editorial traditionally pays a fraction of what commercial usage pays for. But in that case, I was there not for a magazine, I was there for a camera manufacturer. It was commercial use, and I paid them pretty well, and everybody was happy. They got a great set of pictures, they got paid, I got some nice pictures, and everybody's happy. And that's kind of what I try to walk away from my picture situations. I'm not a scorched earth photographer. There are some very well-known photographers in my business who are scorched earth. They leave
What does
behind.
that mean?
That means they don't leave behind warm feelings, warm and fuzzy feelings. They tend to be a little exploitive. But I tend to, I'm still exchanging Christmas cards with people I photographed 35 years ago. So I tend to want to make the experience pleasant for everybody. And I just find it works better that way.
All right, cool. Let's take another couple of pictures. I'm watching the time because we've got a lot to talk about. Here's another one, Bob. This is just like, it's fairy tale. It's like a painting, but it's so crisp. It's amazing. Wow.
Well, it's what I have to put into the classification of a well-executed cliche. And as travel photographers, we have a mixed relationship with cliche views. This is a very famous view among travel photographers of a village in the Dolomites. And when you go to this area, you almost have to try to get this. It's like doing the 7 stages of the cross if you're going to do the pilgrimage or whatever. If you're going to the Dolomites, you got to try to get a picture of this village. And I'm sorry, but the name of the village is escaping me. It's a senior moment, but it's very easily researched. So it was a recent vacation trip. We were coming back from Italy, going up to Munich to fly home. And I convinced Peggy, I said, I just want to go down this valley because I've seen this picture of this village my whole life. I just want to see what I can do with it. And most of the time when I do something like that, it's raining and I can't even get it, you know. But this time I got there and the weather was clearing up and the shafts of light started coming and I found the right viewpoint. And I thought to myself, oh man, I am having a moment. I am having a moment. This is what it's all about. And just as the light got nice, I see this bus coming up the winding hill, and it comes up to the farmer's house and it parks, and out pour 30 Chinese photographers on a photo tour. And they line up all around me with their tripods. And I'm looking at the gear, and there's Hasselblads, and every one of them has better gear than I do. And I got back to the pension that night, and I said to Peggy, I said, it's really a good thing that I'm getting into filmmaking, because travel photography is dead, you know. But it does not take away from my enjoyment, my thrill at seeing that kind of light, my enjoyment of the European landscape. And the thing I love about the European landscape, and it's not that I don't like the American West or whatever, but some of these European landscapes, it's the hand of man and the hand of nature go right together. And they seem to put these churches and these villages right where you want them. You know, it's like you couldn't Photoshop that village in any better. But somehow back in medieval times, some monks hey, this is going to be a great view, or something like that, so that's why I love shooting in England and Italy, these little capellas up on hillsides and stuff. That I react to more than these mythic kind of Icelandic landscapes where there's nothing familiar in there. I love this kind of stuff. So I've been, I send this picture around very proudly, but it has been taken before, and you could probably get it cheaper from any one of 30 photographers from China if we had their contact information than you could from me. I did actually, as I said, stock photography is not much anymore, but I put that on my website, and a Polish jigsaw company saw it and put it on a jigsaw puzzle, and I'm getting royalty payments from that. So it wasn't an entirely wasted afternoon monetarily or aesthetically for me.
Well, congratulations on, I'm glad to hear it. But I will say, it may be a cliche, but your picture is just stunning. And it's not just the composition, the quaintness of it, the saturation of those colors, the light. It feels ridiculous saying this to you, Bob, but you did a really nice job. And that leads me to a question I had for you, which is, I heard a photography teacher say one time, the difference between an amateur and a professional is the number of pictures in the bin, the waste bin.
Yeah, I've heard this, a variation of that, in that the difference between an amateur and a professional is a professional isn't afraid to throw his mistakes away.
But I look at this picture and I go back to what I thought at the time, which is, it's a nice saying, but I can't believe it. I couldn't take that picture.
Oh,
I just couldn't take it.
There's a joke about travel photography, and it goes like this, the light bulb joke. It says, how many travel photographers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 20. 1 to change the light bulb, and 19 to stand around and say, hey, I could have done that job. And the fact is, you often hear, and this goes back to what I said earlier, you often hear, if I was there, I would have taken that picture. Yes, but you were not me or those 30 other Chinese photographers. You weren't there. So it's being in the right place at the right time. And I think almost anybody could not take that picture if they were there. If they were there, and that's the question. And that's the question that photographers really have to entertain more than, do I need a new camera? Should I upgrade? No, it's, you want to be a better photographer, stand in front of more interesting stuff, learn how to be in the right place at the right time. And then these pictures happen. Now, I may be giving away a big secret about travel photography, but that's it. I mean, I appreciate that you think it takes a lot of talent, but I was just there. But I was there, and I went 2 or 3 nights in a row. After I got this, I went back to see if I could do better. And again, that's a throwback to the geographic training that I got working with these masters. James Stanfield, who to my idea is the geographic photographer, did a story on Istanbul. And in that story is this beautiful double-page spread of sunrise over the blue mosques shot from the Hagia Sophia. And it is absolutely stunning. And I didn't know until I sat down in the cafeteria one day with Stanfield. He went back up there 24 sunrises in a row before he was satisfied with what he got. So, you flip that picture open and you flip that magazine open, you say, wow, that's stunning. But, he was just there and he took it. Yeah, he was there, and it could have been day 1. It might've been day 24. I don't know. He didn't say, but going back, being in the right place at the right time, that's the art. The F8 stuff is all in your iPhone already. You don't have to worry about the F8 stuff. You got to worry about that.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's knowing your equipment as well. But, I've been wanting to show your pictures, and people can see those online. And it is a unique opportunity for people to ask you questions. So, Jen, let's get through some more of those questions. And I think William Nicolosi has one about the picture we were just looking at. And let's take those first and work our way through the others.
Sure. William asked, what lens did you use for the shot in the Dolomites? It's a
Uh,
fantastic image.
It was shot with the Sony RX10 Mark IV, the bridge camera with the built-in 24 to 600 millimeter lens. So I think it was about a 105 focal length on there, shot on this little 1-inch sensor camera on a tripod. I had another tripod next to it doing a time lapse of the scene for my video thing. I'm completely now schizoid in some of these things. I'm trying to shoot time lapses, videos, stills, So that the still was shot with the RX10. The time lapses were shot with the well, it might have been the A6600 at that time. So yeah, that's an amateur bridge camera that shot that shot. And it's funny when the Polish puzzle company said, we'd like to see the original on that. Can you send us the raw file? And I said, well, I send you the raw file if I had it, but I was shooting JPEG. And they're like, oh, JPEG, maybe not enough quality. And they said, what camera? And I said, well, it's this bridge camera, not a professional camera. I said, no. I said, I'll send you the original JPEG, see what your quality control people say. Sent them over the JPEG. They said, it's fine. Thank you. So again,
Very good.
yeah, there you go.
All right, what's next, Jen?
I think this kind of goes after that. Douglas wants to know, do you edit your own videos or do you use an assistant?
Good question. I have struggled to learn video editing, but I had to learn it because it makes you a better video shooter. So right now, I will shoot and edit a rough cut. I don't think I'm going to live long enough to become a really sophisticated video editor. So in most cases, I like to try to do a rough cut because I know this story. I know kind of what I have in my mind, but I'm a little sloppy with details. And then I'll try to farm out the final thing to a real editor. However, I'm getting to the point where if I don't have a paying client and I can't afford to hire the editor, in most cases, my rough cuts aren't bad for normal people. A film buff looking at some of my edits would say, oof, boy, those are some amateur mistakes there. But for most of our viewers, it'd be fine. So, but learning how to edit video makes you a much better shooter. And makes you a much better video shooter because it's not quite the same as stills. One thing I learned as a video shooter, you can't be too rich, too thin, or have too many close-ups, and I was never a great close-up shooter as a magazine guy. And I can remember sitting down to edit my first video and it's supposed to be 2 minutes long. And at 1:10, I've run out of cutaways and close-ups. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? You can't just keep running these wide shots. So to this day, I have these little cheat sheets and it's like close-ups. So editing video will make you a better cinematographer.
So Bob, I've got to ask this one as a writer. Jeffrey Renica, again, apologize for any mispronunciation. You mentioned the dynamic between writers and photographers. Have you ever experienced a moment that you felt would be better served by words than pictures?
Jeff Renica is a writer, and he's become a tremendous photographer. But when I knew him and we worked together on a story on Capitol Reef National Park for National Geographic Traveler back in the day. Hello, Jeff. He's doing some great photography. He's finally come around to the right side of the fence there. But yeah, if you want to make something up, it's better to be a writer. I used to, we had an editor down at National Geographic Traveler once who was very writer centric. And I did a story on St. John's in the US Virgin Islands once off of a manuscript sent by a writer. And the writer said, from such and such ridge, there's this beautiful scenic view of the bay, and it's the most beautiful view. And I got up there afterwards and there were like telephone wires and everything all across this view, no matter what I did. So I sent back this picture to the editor saying, he said it's a beautiful view, but it's covered with wires and telegraph wires and stuff. And I get this thing back saying, well, make it work because the writer said it's beautiful. And I was like, ooh, as photographers, we worked in a writer-dominated world. So, and the Geographic was usually pretty good to photographers, but this one editor was very, very writer-centric, shall we say. So yeah, there's plenty of things. I mean, there is no past tense in photography. You can't riff on about the history of a place. If they're not historically reenacting a battle, you can't talk about the battle. If they're not crossing the Delaware in the ships on Christmas Day in Bucks County, you can't photograph history. So yes, there's no past tense in photography, and that's where writing and film, when you can cut to stills in historic films, and that's where they have the advantage. So but it's good. If this is Jeff Renicky, man, you're shooting some great pictures lately, bro. Okay.
Well done. All right. And Jim Feld was asking about, Photoshop and sort of the purity of pictures. And I'd like to put that with Bob. We were talking in our pre-interview about deep fakes, and you touched on it a little bit when you talked about video, and it's just that reliability that of photography is just, it's changing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think the genie of credibility in photography is out of the bottle and is never going to be put back in. But apropos to what we're talking about, judging the Phillips Mill contest, I'm going to remain cognizant of the fact that because I come from a journalism background and everything, I'm not going to let that color my choices of what is art and everything, because I realize that there is a huge difference in the parameters of what counts for what between reality-based journalism, photojournalism, and art photography. So one thing that I'm going to really try to be cognizant of is that not everything is journalism. And so those of you who are art photographers out there, don't worry. I'm going to really do my best as far as that goes. But as far as the believability and the credibility, man, it's, truth has become a very slippery concept in both words and pictures. And smarter people than I will speculate about the long-term implications of this. But again, a reason why I went into film from photography is that the software created pictures were getting so good that I had to rely on things that couldn't be done by software. And so the storytelling aspects of filming and interviewing and stuff. But I realized that is not always the criteria. I mean, Photoshop has allowed for the creation of some wonderful art. I mean, art with a capital A. It has not been available to me in my milieu as a magazine photographer, and but that doesn't mean it's not a legitimate expression. It's when art is passed off as journalism that we have the problem. And you've seen so many examples of this where they're photoshopping more missiles into a news shot and stuff like that. There's been an awful lot of gray area situations where things have been put in and taken out that shouldn't be. And I feel like in news photography, it's sacrosanct, but in art photography, it's art. So there's more room for that kind of expression. I can't do it. I mean, I never got very good at the back shop part of digital photography. I much preferred shooting in color slide film. It was a much more existential experience. You either got it when you shot it or you didn't. And editing slides, I can remember in my office in New Hope in our mill, I used to have a big garbage can next to the light box. And as the boxes came in from an assignment, we'd look at them and say, garbage keeper, garbage keeper, garbage keeper. And I got to tell you, there was something wonderfully simple about that I kind of miss, because now it's like, yeah, the sky is nice, but the foreground sucks. So, yeah, but I could keep it and maybe I'll use the sky and something else. It's like, no, I never had to think about that. It was like, it works, it doesn't work. It works, it doesn't work. And I preferred that, quite frankly.
No. Bob, we're going to go a little bit over, if that's okay, if you don't mind staying a couple
Sure.
more minutes.
Sure.
I'm really dying to ask you about the trip you took with Robert Beck, the painter, well-known painter here in Bucks County, and with Dr. Al Ruenis to Senegal. Dr. Ruenis was doing is ongoing work for people in Africa. Tell us about that trip. I just think it's so fascinating to take a photographer and a painter on a trip like that.
Well, Dr. Ruenis is a great doctor out of Doylestown Hospital, and he does work with prostate cancer, and he was doing his own way of doing a certain operation. And a well-known African surgeon was touring Penn Hospital and saw Al doing this. And Al's procedure saves blood and doesn't need as much aftercare as typical things. So this surgeon named Serene Gay, who's about 6'7", and he will not be denied. He said, "You're coming to Africa and you're going to teach my surgeons how to do this." And Al said, "Okay," and so Al went and fell in love with the country, and they have much higher rates of prostate cancer over there. So it's a huge thing over there. And of course, so Al went over a couple times and said, and just became hooked on doing this, and then started raising money to do a clinic and stuff. And at one point, Al and Bob are friends. I met Al through Bob, and I had just started to do my little videos and stuff. And Al wanted to raise some money. So we concocted one night over many bottles of wine that we would go with him, and Bob would do a series of paintings that he would auction off, and I would do a documentary film about his work that we would show at a fundraising event where we would show Bob's paintings at New Hope Arts. So we went over, and man, it was a life-changing experience, because I have never seen a goat wander into an operating room before, which we did see in a clinic way outside of Dakar, and there was one point where they were doing some surgery, and there was a power outage, and this was the difference between being a still photographer and a videographer. The power went out, and they were plunged into darkness, but they had a patient on the table. And I'm there for about a minute, and I'm thinking, God, this, I can't shoot in the dark. They can't operate. And then I thought, hey, wait, you're a video guy. You don't have a flash. You have an LED light, a battery powered LED light. So, brain trust here. It only took me about a minute, and I said, guys, I have a light. And because they were sending everybody around looking for generators and stuff, and I gave them my light, and they finished the operation by my LED light and stuff. So I mean, we had experiences like that, and it was just phenomenal. And Bob did some great paintings, and we raised a fair amount of money, and now Al has a clinic over there that he's funded, and then he got involved with some other people doing fistula surgery in Ethiopia, and I went over and did a thing in Ethiopia with him. We're due for another trip, I think, but it's been wonderful, and it's just it's just been a wonderful experience to see Al doing that work over there, and the kind of hands across the ocean stuff that can happen when people interact this way. And I think that's part of why we travel, why we do this, to find these these links of common humanity and everything. So so it's been a lot of fun. The only thing I've never gotten used to Ethiopian food. I know everybody loves Ethiopian food, but I would be ordering pizzas while they were eating all this great Ethiopian food because I just couldn't get my taste buds around it. But that was the only downside. And it was a wonderful experience. And I know it was life-changing for Bob too. And he did some wonderful paintings. And so it was all around a fun thing for three guys from Bucks County to do.
It sounds like a great trip. I have so many more questions for you, Bob, and there are a lot more questions for you in the Q&A. And unfortunately, I know we've got to let you go. You're preparing for a trip.
Yes. God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'm supposed to leave a week from tonight to shoot a little documentary about Carnival in Venice, which was postponed from last year. So it's been something I've been working on, the preparations, for 2 years. And I think it may happen. I'm knocking on wood. Every day I get a different set of requirements from the EU to prove, you know, how many vaccinations you've got and how current your COVID test has to be and stuff. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. And we're going to be over there for about 10 days. And we're going to be doing a whole thing on the tradition of Carnival and the masks. I've got interviews set up with the 3 top mask makers in Venice, and also the costumers, the people who come from all around the world to design these fabulous costumes. And a lot of them, they're not locals. They're from Austria, they're from France, they're from Germany, they're from the US. And it's a tradition that has a long history, but had a hiatus of about 400 years until the early 70s when it was revitalized. And now it's quite something. So it's a documentary project. It's a personal project. It's coming out of my pocket. So fortunately, when you buy airline tickets 2 years ahead of time, you get pretty good prices. But so we'll just see. And I got trip cancellation insurance. So I should, you know, what can go wrong?
What can go wrong? Well, we'll knock on wood for that one too. Jen, if you would, while we're closing out, let's put up a picture of the Bob's book cover for your old souls and ancient places.
Yes.
I'm really excited about that. And I hope you'll let us know, Bob. Well, tell us a few words about that, and then we'll say goodnight.
This was a book kind of project that kind of, as I got more into film, I said, what stills really mean a lot to me. And it turned out to be a lot of black and white work. So I actually took some money from a copyright infringement award and self-published this book. And it's won a couple of awards. And unfortunately, because of COVID supply chain, we're down pretty low, but I think Farley still has a couple of copies. And if anybody's really interested, they can drop me a line and I'll tell you how to get it. It's not widely available anymore. It was for a while, but I haven't been able to go back to press with it. So, but it was a wonderful kind of experience revisiting still photography after 10 years of filmmaking to look at what really moved me. And it turned out that black and white, how I started on a newspaper back in Union City in 1976, black and white was what kind of, after a career of making bright, colorful travel pictures for travel magazines, black and white was what I wanted to do for my first kind of monograph. So try Farley's. If Farley's can't help you, drop me an email and I don't have any where I am now, but we can figure out a way to get copies to people. We do it in return for a donation to the foundation we have in memory of Johnny Krist, which does outreach in inner city schools in Camden and Trenton and stuff like that. So it's a not-for-profit venture. You make a donation to the foundation and you get a book. Or you can get it from Farley's. Farley's is the only place. Farley's in New Hope. is the only bookstore that's carrying it right now. So that's the story there.
That's great, Bob. And that's at bobkrist.com. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Bob, let us know how your trip to Venice turns out.
Okay.
Be in touch when you come. We'd love to, the photography team would love to show you the photography show when it opens up.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah. Bob Krist, thank you very much for joining us on Art Talk.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. And good luck with during the photo exhibition. Have a great trip. And tonight's Art Talk was put together by executive producer Jen McHugh for Art Talk, as well as Jean Mahich and Dennis Riley. Thanks also to Spencer Saunders and the Phillips Mill Photography Committee. We're very excited to see that show, the images that Bob selects and the prizes. It opens in person and online at the Mill on April 2nd. We hope to see all of you there. It's always a great show. And next up on Art Talk, we have a video on Sunday of the Youth Art Show, which is now online at phillipsmill.com. And that's a beautiful, expressive show. Check it out. Thank you all for joining us tonight. The recording of this program will be posted to our website soon, and please share it with your friends. I'm Laura Womack, and have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Before we start, it's I think people are saying hello, Bob, and
Okay.
Robert Beck, I'm going to ask this now. He wants to know, what photo do you want to accompany your New York Times obit?